Okay, so I'm in a guest house here and I'm trying to record this with some strange lighting because that's the best I can do. We have discussed solar radiation management, blocking the sun, using aerosols to dim the sunlight to reduce global warming, and so on, a geoengineering solution. We have discussed the unintended consequences that we can learn from past volcanic eruptions, the year without summer, and crop losses and droughts across the world, and so on and so forth. This Washington Post article goes back to this idea. Private companies have raised millions to block the sun. What could go wrong? Proponents of the controversial climate solution say startups can develop a potentially world changing technology faster than plotting university scientists. University scientists are going slow because they think the unintended consequences cannot easily be controlled. If private entities are going to try it, then there should be legal frameworks within which there are penalties for unintended consequences, right? So that's the idea. So let's see what it has to say. It's a longish article. I don't know how much I will read off it, but you get the idea. For as little as $1, you can dim the sun just a tiny bit to save the world from climate change. At least that's the promise sold by a California startup called Make Sunsets. So the dollar will pay for founder Luke Eisman to drive a Winnebago RV into the hills half an hour outside Saratoga. So essentially, they will send up sorry, balloons loaded with sulfur dioxide up into the atmosphere. This is an air pollutant that's normally put out by volcanic eruptions as well. So he and his thousand paying customers hope to the balloon will burst in the stratosphere, releasing particles that will block sunlight and cool the planet, so emulating volcanic eruptions. Iceman's sun blocking activities, which aren't officially approved by any government on Earth, but aren't illegal under the California law, are an example of a controversial tactic called solar geoengineering. It's been a subject of many scientific fiction stories and conspiracy theories, and at least one US spy report warning that it could spark real world wars. And if you create real problems, it could lead to real conflicts, of course. But now it's becoming a private industry, and Make Sunset has raised more than $1 million from investors and sold more than $100,000 worth of cooling credits to customers this year. So we have to understand the details. But there is another company, Stardust, which has raised $75 million to develop a more sophisticated geoengineering method. It says will be ready to launch by the end of the decade, although its founders vow they won't deploy the technology unless a government hires them to do so. Thank you. So the companies have sparked debate, and there are other people trying this. When you are not breaking the rules in California, so you will do it there. But if it spreads across the world, who's responsible? Is it California? Is it the startup company? And serious issues, right? So basic outdoor equipment tests in Sweden and California have been tried, but they got pushed back and canceled their plans. They give up, said Max Ament, a venture capitalist and Stardust investor. If I'm an entrepreneur at heart, no, there's no I'll give up next topic. I'll solve this problem without compromising safety. So, they promise you that it will be safe, but again, legal framework is needed to deal with unintended consequences. But opponents say profit-seeking companies have no business developing a technology designed to affect everyone on Earth, which may have unintended consequences for global weather patterns and could kill people by raising air pollution and cancer rates. So people don't trust private companies in general to make decisions, and people say the whole move fast and break things ethos. I have seen it, and it hasn't gone particularly well for the society. Most governments have no specific geoengineering regulation. Focusing on the US, Tennessee, Louisiana, Florida have banned any such aerosol solar dimming kind of experiments, and uh, also uh, there are bans across the US at the federal level and in Mexico, but US works in this system where states have their own rules and people can go do things. Environmental Protection Agency says it's investigating make sunsets and conducting an internal review of any current authorities that can be utilized to halt this activity. So there is a link to dig this deeper if you want. Meanwhile, private geoengineering companies have few rules to follow. So their heads are still in the sand as far as companies considering these things without worrying about the consequences. People have proposed ways to bounce sunlight away from Earth to lower temperatures, including sprinkling reflective particles into the stratosphere, making clouds shinier. It's called cloud brightening, and launching giant space mirrors into orbit. So that's going rogue. A friend, Elon Musk, who is always making exciting, controversial statements, says a large solar-powered AI satellite constellation would be able to prevent global warming by making tiny adjustments in how much solar energy reaches Earth. Of course, all these things don't understand that the distribution of rainfall, winds, snow, precipitation, drought, floods, everything is related to sunlight coming in. If you tinker with it, then you change the patterns and they are not easily predictable. But what we know is that overall, a lot more droughts happen when volcanic eruptions dim the sun, which is a natural experiment we are trying to emulate in this kind of geoengineering, but ignoring the fact that volcanoes create droughts and crop losses and so on. Okay, so these methods are supposed to be cheaper and faster than rewiring the world, so removing CCS, carbon capture, etc. And they have numbers on how to halve the global warming rate for 15 years by dusting the stratosphere with sulfur dioxide, and that would cost only 2.25 billion per year, according to a 2018 estimate, which is already few years old. Theoretically, rogue billionaires could afford to at least start changing the climate on their own. That's the premise of the science fiction novel Termination Shock, which inspired Eisman to found Make Sunset in 2022. You can go read Termination Shock to see what it says, but it's about geoengineering. Termination shock in solar radiation management is that if you start spraying something like sulfur dioxide or whatever we mentioned here, sulfur dioxide, and you start dimming the sun and you stop at some point, two things to worry about. The system will want to bounce back. Secondly, and when you're doing sunlight blocking, sun blocking, whatever, you are not reducing, if you are not reducing emissions, then you are accumulating carbon dioxide in the system anyways. So that will have other issues. And if you have termination shock, then you can have rapid rewarming and so on. Okay, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about how awesome that would be, he said. So there are always these crazy people who want to think of this as some exciting experiment without, they say we'll be safe, we'll make sure nobody gets harmed and so on and so forth, but who's to trust them, right? So there are few people willing to defend independent geoengineers, including Andrew Lockley, a British researcher formerly affiliated with the University College of London. He ran his own field test in 2022, releasing a balloon carrying 400 grams of sulfur dioxide, cheekily named the Stratospheric Aerosol Transport and Nucleation, or SATAN project. He also co-wrote a 2023 paper, and he argues that people may have a right to dim the sun themselves, so long as they do proper planning and monitoring. If Elon Musk says he's starting tomorrow, if Elon says he's starting tomorrow, well, that just frees up my weekends. So there are obviously people who really believe in this, and David Keith is one of them, who's moved from Harvard to Chicago now, I think, and he's pushing this very hard as well. And he has a company called Climate Systems Engineering Initiative, at the University of Chicago, and he runs private companies as well, and he wants to do this. So Make Sunsets has released just over 240 pounds of sulfur dioxide this year, so they are already doing it, well short of the millions of tons a year it would take to change the global temperatures. Reaching the scale would require thousands of flights per year from specialized planes, and at least the quiet tolerance of governments deciding to look the other way, said Gernot Wagner. So if they start ramping up the amount of sulfur dioxide, then governments may begin to notice. So there's no Silicon Valley venture capitalist who is able to do this. Full stop. Even the billionaires even the billionaire who has hundreds of billions of dollars is running out of money sooner or later. So there are other issues about how much it will cost to scale this up. Not every one of these countries might have a democratically elected government acting in the best interest of the planet. So this is where the other debate about 1.5 degree C threshold crossing etc., come into play, because if we say it's very dangerous to cross 1.5 degrees C global warming, and some countries, and then we say, well, we are about to cross it, and already there are predictions that we'll cross it before 2030. Will we shoot over and come back, or will we stay above, and so on? All details matter, but some nice dictator may say, well, this is dangerous, I'm going to do something on my own, right? And it doesn't even have to be a dictator. Even democratically elected presidents are doing strange things. So if a country decides to dim the sun, Stardust would like to be the company they call. So Stardust wants to do it legally with permission, but does that mean they can guarantee safety? Not really. Founded in 2023 by Yanai Yedvab, I don't know how it's pronounced, and Amiad Spector, nuclear physicists who met in an Israeli national lab, and particle physicist Eli Waxman, the startup's 25 staff scientists are developing a new reflective particle, which they say won't make people sick or thin the ozone layer, unlike sulfur dioxide, and the technology to sprinkle it into the stratosphere and monitor where it goes. So they are not using chemicals, they are using some particles that are non-chemical, so they think it will be safer. Our mission is to develop a safe and responsible and practical manner to cool the planet, end-to-end solution that we expect will be ready in the next few years and cost 1,000 times cheaper than any other alternative. What happened there? Did I skip some details? Yeah, I think my file got corrupted. I saw it said it's saving, and then I didn't pay attention. Obviously, it chopped off. So let me come back and restart it. Sorry about that. So let's continue the story. We said. So they Israeli company, people from Israel who started the company say they will offer an alternative that's cheaper than anybody else. So that's Amit Spector and Yanai Yedvab, as Stardust contained the particle dispersion technology facility in Israel. Okay, so they are also ready. So many geoengineering experts have criticized Stardust for its secrecy. The company hasn't released any information about its new patent pending particle. It hasn't published any it hasn't published a long-promised code of conduct detailing how it will carry out tests, whom it will work with, and how it would deploy its technology. Politico reported that Stardust has been secretly lobbying Congress. Stardust's lobbying firm blamed its failure to disclose on a clerical error. So it's always a smart answer. So they've gone about it in a very wrong way possible, in every wrong way possible, Talati said. They've kind of run under the radar for the last couple of years. They have made no efforts around engaging with the public. They have made no efforts around transparency. But Edward says the company will publish scientific papers at the beginning of next year, so that would be 26, I hope, detailing its particle and the results of its indoor experiments once they clear peer review. They are putting the finishing touches on the code of conduct, and they have filed their legally required lobbying disclosures. He said Stardust will only work with governments that have adequate regulatory frameworks and aren't likely to engage in irresponsible deployment. So it comes down to trust between the public and these private sectors who are promising these things. But even that may not satisfy scientists who are skeptical Stardust can support the bold claims it's made about its particle. Yadbub said the particle can be inhaled without any safety hazards. Keith, head of the University of Chicago geoengineering program, called that, Yadwab said the particle can be inhaled without any safety hazards, but David Keith, the head of the University of Chicago geoengineering program, called that total unadulterated bullshit. Okay, so David Keith has his own ideas. So whether it's a scientific opinion he's offering or it's a competition, you have to just figure it out in the end when these things begin to happen. Any particle that falls from the stratosphere will react with gases and glom onto other particles along the way, creating unforeseen health risks. Keith said the idea that Stardust could study the full effects of its still secret particle and declare it risk free in a few years is just a joke, Keith said. But David Keith himself is getting a lot of pushback for him going around the world saying spraying these aerosols in the stratosphere will not really change rainfall or will even increase rainfall, which are completely inconsistent with past results based on volcanic eruptions. And unfortunately, after attending a seminar here in India, I wasn't convinced that he knows the model he's using, the climate model, very well, and the way the experiments are done to emulate spraying of aerosols was done with tweaking with the solar constant, which is not at all the same as putting particles and letting them interact with the circulation, with clouds, and so on. Stardust plans to use the 60 million it raised in October to start a new phase of testing next year. Yadvab said they won't release their particle into the atmosphere yet, but eventually they will do outdoor tests. By then, he said he hopes there will be clear regulations to follow. Making money, of course, these are private entities, they are not doing charity. Many critics of Make Sunsets and Stardust say there could be a role for private companies to develop and sell high altitude planes, particle spraying devices, atmospheric monitoring tools, and other technology that be useful for geoengineering. But they worry that if a company's main source of revenue is geoengineering, it will have strong profit motives to cool the planet, even if it isn't in the world's best interest. Well, how long can they do it? If there are serious consequences, negative consequences, then there will be a big legal battle anyway. The investors are going to want something out of the money that they put in, said Daniel Visioni, an assistant professor of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at Cornell University. Stardust's investors say they are willing to lose money if governments decide not to pursue geoengineering. Stardust is either something that doesn't return capital or it's one of the most important companies in the world, said Finn Murphy, who runs a 30 million venture capital fund and made his biggest investment in Stardust. This only works if you get an international coalition of countries to buy into this being the right solution, and I just don't think you get there by haphazard deploying. Eisman, the Make Sunset founder, takes the opposite approach. Although his company is losing money, he said he's one meaningful AI data center offset contract away from being highly profitable. Profit is important because if the company makes money, then we can continue indefinitely, and then we can scale, he said. You think this is weird and loud now? Wait till it's bringing in a couple of $1 million or several hundred millions and has a measurable impact on global climate. Then things will get really interesting. Well, in a good way or a bad way. I don't know if we will get there, but someone will, Eisman said. Eisman added, whether you love us or hate us, we have let the genie out of the bottle in some small way. Okay? So I wanted to include it just because it's a story that we all have to watch out for, because if these guys either end up injecting things into the atmosphere because there is no legal barrier, or because they lobbied and got permissions from governments. What is the administration structure in the world to manage this? Will all countries have to sign on before anybody can do anything? Because we're dealing with a global common, the atmosphere, and everybody's health and other agriculture, everything will be at risk. So unless we know the risk, we don't want to play these games. So let me leave it here.